Hi everybody, Professor Wills here. I just wanted to continue our discussion about the four areas you want to consider to understand and analyze art. You've already learned about function. There's also visual form. Aesthetics is coming up too. But right here with this video lecture, I wanted to talk about content. So let's pivot to the PowerPoint and get into it a little bit. All right, so I'm showing you a couple of slides here of two paintings that date about 500 years apart. They're both European. We have this one and this one. Let's go with the earlier one first. And if you look up above here, I have a definition for content. The mass of ideas associated with each artwork communicated through the following: imagery, symbols, where displayed, writings to explain it, and the customs, beliefs, values of those who see and use it. So what I'm going to do is take my talking head away, if I can find my icon to do so, and we will examine this example from the Italian Renaissance of the 15th century. It's by a painter by the name of Botticelli, The Birth of Venus, from circa, or approximately, 1482. Don't worry about the medium. That's just there in case you're curious. That was sort of the choice in those days. So what you find here is a painting that reflects the beliefs and values of the Renaissance. I'm not saying that they believed in goddesses of love and beauty from antiquity, because Venus, as known to the Romans as Venus, and Aphrodite to the ancient Greeks, was the goddess of love and beauty. What the people of the 15th and 16th and even 17th centuries revered about the classical world of the ancient Greeks and Romans was the fact that it was a cultural model to inspire their cultural and philosophical output in the era of the Renaissance, which is defined as a rebirth, an era that emerged from the medieval period, some say from the Dark Ages, but basically a period earlier that was equally Christian, but whose artistic expression was less naturalistic, was more based in distortions to convey sort of otherworldly spiritual beings like Jesus and God and saints, that kind of thing as well. The pendulum swings back to naturalism thanks to this re-examination of a deeper inspiration board, if you will, pivoting back 1,000 years or more to Greco-Roman culture. And that's what happened in the Renaissance. So guys like Botticelli are taking a look at antiquity. They have clients like the powerful Medici family who commission this work of art, who are interested in the classical world, not only for the naturalism you see here. If you look at Venus in this painting, she's in proportion. Her arms and legs aren't too short or too long. Her head isn't too large. She looks fairly naturalistic, though idealized, of course, but you know, she's the goddess of love and beauty. We can give her a pass on being too beautiful. So this is one of the values that is reflected in that particular painting. And of course, you know, despite the fact that it's a very Christian era, you find that in the Renaissance, they're still willing to, you know, hang up paintings of mythological gods and goddesses. It's just part of the whole fascination with the Greco-Roman world. The ancient Greeks, for instance, you know, revered the human body and often had a plethora of sculpture and paintings depicting the human body. When you think about ancient Greece being the birthplace of the Olympic Games, the whole fascination with athleticism, perfecting the human, you know, physiology, that's part of the spirit of the age that continues in the Renaissance. Now, Women weren't so much shown in the nude as much as men were back in antiquity in the ancient Greek world. But Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, was one exception. So that's why we see her nude. She does have gestures of modesty, so it's not meant to be an erotic painting. Instead, it's meant to describe the moment of her birth from the sea, and she arrives on a clamshell to her legendary island, where her nymph is about to drape her in this beautiful floral fabric. And then you have two figures on the left with wings. They represent personifications or ideas and concepts in human form. So they are supposed to represent the ocean breezes blowing her to shore. Of course, this painting always reminds me of a Pantene shampoo commercial where those models are always showing how, lustrous their hair is after using a shampoo product like that. But there you have it. So this is an example of how the values of the Renaissance inform the content of the painting. All right, let's pivot to a work of art, also a painting some 500 years later by the iconic painter of the 20th century, Pablo Picasso. A painter from Spain living in Paris for a good chunk of his life, where he is working and always forward thinking in taking art into a new direction. So much of the goals of modern art of the 20th century is to kind of leave traditional art behind, to break away from an obligation toward optical realism, making human figures, like Botticelli did, proportional, look like us, have environments that are, as we see in our own world, whether indoor or outdoor. We start to see them start to move away from that. So Cubism is one art historical style associated with the 20th century that Picasso was one of the architects of, so to speak. He conceptualized of a way of describing in an abstract way subjects with an emphasis on form and shape. So that was one of his goals here, as well as many ways of seeing a group of subjects, but from many different vantage points. So let me explain what I'm talking about. So if you look at the painting on the left, and I'm okay with just the English title, by the way, The Ladies of Avignon, painted around 1907. This is an example of early Cubism. He is happened to be in Spain at the time, actually passed by a brothel, one of those houses of prostitution. And there apparently were women who were kind of on display, making themselves known and what kind of business it was. Now, he wasn't fascinated with the erotic quality of such an establishment. Instead, he sees these women and the way they're kind of gathered together as kind of like muses. A muse is a source of inspiration that kind of gets your creative juices flowing. And so this became a memory he takes back to his art studio, and he starts to render the arrangement of these women, but with an emphasis on form or shape. So if you notice, all of them are described, and the background too, in various kind of shard-like shapes, almost like, if you took a sheet of ice and broke it with a hammer, you'd have all kinds of these jagged shards. So not strong geometrically, not like squares or circles, but we have still an emphasis on form or shape, and he's describing the background that way, and he's describing their bodies that way too. If you look at their arms and torsos and legs, you can see an echo of that shard-like shape you see in the background as well. The other thing he's playing with is he wants to form two views or multiple views within one painting. In the history of art, most artists and their subjects, say you're painting a model of someone in the studio who's posing for you, the easel is in a fixed location, the model is in a fixed location, and that distance is often described in the painting as a consistent vantage point. what you find with Cubist art and a lot of other modern artists as well, that he's interested in conveying both near and far views. So if you look at the women in the middle, their eyes are different sizes. One eye is larger than the other, as if to describe being both close to them, where of course your eye would seem larger, and standing back a bit, where it would seem smaller. Also, if you look at the woman on the far right on the bottom, her legs are in profile view or sideways. Her trunk is turned facing us. So you also have a couple different views going on here, both a front and side view. So these many ways of seeing a subject is part of the Cubist experiment. It's when you think about the era we're in, we're getting to the point where physics is on the rise, splitting an atom, being able to see things in different ways is happening in science, and now it's kind of spilling over in art. Now, part of the inspiration for this journey for Picasso was an exhibit he saw in Paris of African art. France, of course, was a big colonial participant, and so had a lot of presence in Africa, and so this art's kind of flowing into Europe. Picasso attends an exhibit, and it's there he's seeing carvings and masks and figures where, for instance, in the little thumbnail image I have there on the bottom, you have a mask where you do have face that's represented perhaps in side view as well as front view. Sort of this many ways of seeing within a mask is a normal occurrence in many regions of Africa, in many kind of cultural purposes, often ritualistic. And so it's an expressive vocabulary that is more commonplace that he then adopts, brings into the look of this particular painting. So if you see these women on the far right, they have mask-like faces, particularly the one on the bottom, a face that looks both sideways and forward. So he has, the privilege of being a European artist, benefits from, the unfortunate circumstance of colonialism, but it's these ideas that permeate his work and then push for the agenda of modern art. So this is an example with Cubism of how the belief system in the art world of pushing, the pawn on the game board of progressive art forward inspires them to look for muses, to look to break away from traditional vantage points, introduce description through form and shape, many ways of seeing. This is how looking at content and considering how the artist arrived at it is an important thing to consider. All right, thanks for watching.